I'll share here that there is one metric that I absolutely hate, which is totally useless. And somehow it's stuck in the zeitgeist and people still care about it and they still talk about it. And that metric is NPS, Net Promoter Score. Net
Okay.
Promoter
Yeah.
Score is this general idea that you ask someone on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend my product or service to a friend or colleague? And there's been a lot of very interesting information about what does this mean? What does one do with an NPS? And so many boards of directors are like asking for an NPS score, and the CEO wants to have a good NPS score, and so on and so forth. For the most part, especially in B2B, Larson, this is completely useless. And there's a lot of data, particularly from a guy in Utah named Greg Danes, who's done a ton of research on this. And his data shows he's got a humongous data set. His data shows that there is absolutely zero correlation between NPS and retention, right? Meaning it has nothing to do. So you might have an NPS of 80 or you might have an NPS of 10 and they renew at exactly the same rate, which is another way of saying they churn at exactly the same rate. Mm-hmm. So I find NPS to be completely useless. It's a burden on the customer because you're asking them to do work. People don't even know what to do with the inputs once they get them back from the clients. And so that's all really, really important. So NPS is just one of these things that people are like latched onto. Now, having said that, Greg's research also then shows that there is a very strong correlation between churn or retention and not the NPS score, but whether the customer completed the survey.
Oh, interesting. Like almost engagement on that survey.
It's something like 6x difference. If they filled out the survey, then they're 6 times more likely to stick around than if they didn't. So it's a sign of engagement. It's a sign of commitment. It's a sign that they're probably already getting value. And by the way, we all know these terms like the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right?
Yeah.
So if a customer is responding, but they give you a low score, they at least went through the effort, right, of responding to give you an opportunity to fix whatever came up. So that's really interesting. So when I think of metrics, I think of those important kind of business ones. And every time I hear people's like index on NPS, I'm like, drives me crazy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it is like that. That is a really interesting finding to uncover there. It's like the actual score isn't really isn't that meaningful, but the engagement behind it. So here's just an off the cuff question: you still think it's valid or even worth it to send out an NPS survey or any type of survey in that regard? Does that give you any information that's meaningful?
Well, so it turns out there's much better ways to get this information than through an NPS survey. And the better way to do that is to become more sophisticated in your approach to customers. And specifically, how can you orient toward the goals that they have? So how deeply can you understand their goals? And based on those goals, can you measure the value that your product or service is providing back to them? Mm-hmm. Again, this is not my data. This all comes from Greg Danes. But what Greg says is, if you are able to show value back to the customer, first of all, you got to decide what to track, right? So you sell whatever it is, CRM software, and you might say, well, the value that I want to track is how much is the pipeline growing, for example. That could be a reasonable thing. And so you're showing that back to the customer. Hey, your pipeline's growing by 3%, 10%, 5%, whatever it is. The simple act, and this is important for account managers to understand, the simple act of deciding on a metric that's customer facing, meaning it's something the customer cares about, and tracking that over time, first of all, makes you look more like a strategic partner, makes you more valuable to the customer, and increases your chances of renewal and upsell, period. Simply deciding what to track. And then the amazing thing is, when you show that data back to the customer, you would think that there's some great big high bar for ROI, right? Oh, I got to show them that this is worth 10 times their investment or 3 times their investment or whatever it is. Also untrue.